Good morning, students. Today we are going to learn 2.4 The Fall of Troy. There are two parts. We are going to see the first part today. Epics are long poems that relate the deeds of a great national hero or a great national war. They often tell of a nation's early history. They may be composed and sung or recited for many years before they are actually written down. So here the writer has mentioned what's meant by epic. Epic is a long poem that relate the deeds, the actions, the activities of a great national hero or a great national war. And such type of epics are written afterwards, but they were they were sung, composed, and recited for many years before they are actually written down. The two famous Sanskrit epics are the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and the two great epics of European literature written in ancient Greek are the Iliad and the Odyssey. Just as in Indian literature, we go back to stories from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. So, in the literature of Western countries, they go back to the Iliad and the Odyssey. The writer has mentioned here as in our country, in India, most of the children are aware about the characters of Ramayana and Mahabharata. In the same way, in foreign countries, in Greek, the children are aware about their epics called the Iliad and the Odyssey. Just as children all over India know the names of stories of Ram and Sita, Yudhishthira and Arjuna and Draupadi, so children in Western countries know the names of Hector, Odysseus, and Achilles, and Helen of Troy, who was considered the most beautiful woman in the world, because of whom the Greek and Trojan fought for 10 long years. So here the writer says that the children of Greek know these characters. Nobody knows for certain who the author of these early epics is. It's thought that they arose and developed with the nation itself and were handed down from singer to singer till perhaps one great poet gave them their final form. So here writer tells us that nobody knows who the author of these early epics. It's thought that they arose and developed with the nation itself. It's believed that the Iliad and the Odyssey were composed and recited by a blind poet named Homer. Remember the name of the poet, Homer. So the people believe that this blind poet had composed and recited these two epics. Homer, who lived about 900 BCE, before Christian era, and who wandered from one Greek city or village to another, singing his poems to all who would receive him in their homes and give him hospitality. This wandering singer has been honored through the ages, not only in Greece but in all Europe as the father of European poetry. So writer tells that the poet, the blind poet Homer, used to wander from one village or city to another and he used to sing, recite for those who used to receive him, who used to treat him with hospitality. This wandering singer, poet Homer, has been famous in Greece and all over Europe as the father of European poetry. The Iliad is the story of Ilium or Troy, a rich trading city in Asia Minor near the narrow sea that leads from the Aegean to the Black Sea. It was well situated both for commerce and agriculture. So, this city of Troy was well situated for both commerce, that is, trade, and even farming. In front of the city was the sea, over which sailed the ships of Troy, carrying goods and grain. In front of this city there was a sea, and the people used to travel or transport the goods and the grain using the waterways. At the back rose the high peak of Mount Ida, from which flowed many rivers and streams. The valleys among the hills were well watered and fertile, with corn growing in fertile fields and cattle feeding on the rich grass of the meadows, while sheep fed on the slopes of the hills. So, writer has mentioned that the area of this city, Troy, was good for farming, animal husbandry, and even for trade. Around their city, the Trojans had built a strong wall so that no enemy would attack them from the sea. The wall was so broad that people could stand and sit and walk on it. The great gates stood open, and people could go to the seashore outside and come in as they pleased, as they were happy. So the people used to go out and come inside according to their wish. The wall was so strong so that they would be able to walk, sit, and stand on that wall which was around the city of Troy. But in time of war, the gates would be closed, and then the city was like a strong fortress. The city was like a castle, like a strong fort, quite safe from all attack, protected by the walls surrounding it as well as by the hills behind. So this Troy city was naturally protected. At the backside there was Mount Ida, and the front side there was a sea. And again, the citizen built a strong wall around the city so that it would be safe from the outsiders. Thus, Troy was a strong city, strongly protected by its walls and strongly defended by its brave soldiers. But all the kings and heroes of Greece had declared war against the Trojans. What is the reason? Why did the kings and heroes of Greece had declared war against the Trojans? The reason is Paris, who was a prince of Troy, had persuaded Helen, who was a wife of a Greek king, Menelaus, to elope with him. He had brought her to Troy. The Greeks wanted to take revenge on Troy for the wrong done to Menelaus, to their king. They sailed to Troy and laid siege to the city. So all the Greek kings soldiers came to Troy and they laid a siege. They stood around the city of Troy because they want to take revenge. The Trojans too fought hard, and the siege continued for 10 long years. When the Greeks came to fight against the Trojans were also brave. They also fought hard, and in this way the siege continued for 10 long years. The fighting went on daily, but the siege did not end. On the one hand, the Greeks could not take the city, and on the other hand, the Trojans could not force them to sail away. Every day, the Trojans came out of their gates, and the Greeks came out of their tents and ships, and the fighting went on. Sometimes there were great battles between the two armies. Sometimes there were single fights between the two great heroes. Sometimes the Trojans had the better of it, and sometimes the Greeks. But still the fighting went on. So this was such a war which continued for long 10 years, and the Trojans could not force them to move away, and the Greeks could not overcome them. The Greeks could not take the city of Troy under their control. Great heroes on both sides were killed in the course of the war. After leading the defense of his city for 9 years, the brave Hector was at last killed by Achilles, whom none could resist. The great Hector was finally killed by Achilles, whom none could resist. But Achilles himself was killed later on by a poisoned arrow that entered his heel. In this way, both the great heroes were killed because of a poisoned arrow. The only part of his body where he could be wounded. We know that in Ramayana and even in Mahabharata there were great characters. Like in Ramayana, Ravana was such a character that his full body was so strong, and again only a part of his body could be injured, and nobody was known the part except Ravana's brother Vibhishana, who guided Rama, and then according to that Ravana was killed by Ram. In the same way here also, his only that part of his heel could be injured, and unluckily that part was wounded and he also passed away. Still later, Paris himself was killed also by a poisoned arrow. The Trojans were tired of being shut up in their city, and the Greeks were longing to see their homes again. But still the fighting went on. So here the writer says both of them want to end the war. The Greeks were far away from their homes, and they stayed in front of the Trojan city. So it was their wish. It was the wish of the Greek soldiers to go to their own house, and the Trojans were inside the city. They were also tired of being captured in the city. That is why both of them wanted to end the war, but they couldn't, and in this way The war continued for long 10 years. And now we are going to see in the next part how the war would be ended. But in the first part only this much is given. So students, listen the lesson, read the lesson carefully and do the activities. Thank you.